In this list, we're going to take a look at a game on the Super Nintendo that has some of the cheapest deaths on the system, in my opinion. So in this video, we're going to look at 10 games in my Super Nintendo collection. This isn't a best of list, nothing like that. I'm just going to share 10 games that I have in my collection with you, share some memories, and share some memories with me in the comments if you have memories of any games in this list. Game number 31 in my Super Nintendo collection is going to be Daffy Duck, The Marvin Missions. Now this game is based on those Looney Tune cartoons where we had Daffy Duck as Duck Dodger in the 24th and a half century. I always thought those cartoons in the Looney Tune cartoons were kind of cool, so kind of thought this was going to be a fun game when I first saw it. Now this is a side-scrolling platformer. We have 20 levels in this one. The controls are definitely a little slippery. Daffy gets a little squirrely on us sometimes here, but it is still a fun game even though those slippery controls can get a little frustrating. Now right at the start, we can pick some weapons we want to take with us. Definitely select a few different options before you jump into the first level. Because some of your enemies, even just the regular enemies in this one, they can take a beating. They'll be soaking up those shots. You're definitely going to want to be using that shield mechanic. This game does have those 5 different guns you can select through. You can scroll through them while you're playing. I like to use the freeze gun, freeze the enemy, and then swap back over to just the regular gun with infinite ammo and just blast them until they're gone. But once you get that figured out, you kind of get a handle on those slippery controls, this game can actually be a lot of fun. We're going to be adventuring around in these levels using that jetpack to kind of fly around. It does have that fuel bar. You're going to want to pick up more fuel as you go. Pick up money as you're going along. You can use that in between the levels to buy more ammo for those other guns that you're going to want to use as you're going along here. But overall, this is a really fun game on the Super Nintendo. It's not a super expensive game. It's one you can pick up and just have a good time playing. Now, number 32 in my Super Nintendo, they took SimCity and they gave it a bit of a Nintendo vibe here. SimCity on the Super Nintendo, number 32. In my Super Nintendo set. Now I can remember the very first time I ever saw this. So yeah, I'd seen SimCity on the computers at the high school back when we had computer labs where you had to teach us how to type, and then you had the library that had those random computers where you could go and kind of do your research and then do that pesky English paper you needed to do. But the first time I ever remember seeing this actual version of SimCity was in my cousin's basement. Now, we were in the city and we had stopped to drop off something. I don't even remember what, because all of my memories from that moment are pointed towards what was on the TV when we walked down the stairs into that basement. SimCity on the Super Nintendo, I was in love with this game. The moment I saw it, I love that they added Bowser as like one of the disasters in the game. And after sitting watching my cousin play this for about 10 minutes, I knew this was a game I needed in my life. So after some begging, cleaning my room, and probably annoying my parents to no end, I actually got this one as a gift as a kid. And I loved it. Now back then, I used to be super into the cartoon Cowboys of Moo Mesa, which is anamorphic cows that were cowboys in this like western timey town. It had me hooked, and for some reason I decided that I was going to use like a naming convention based on that cartoon. So when I played SimCity, my cities were named things like Port Moo and Moo City. But those cities got built many, many times on the Super Nintendo back in the day. And those memories are still really strong in my head. My favorite thing about video games, toys, things like that are those strong memories that come back. I can remember walking down the stairs and seeing my cousin playing this game and being like, what is that? I need to have that. I can remember sitting and spending hours setting it to like the fastest speed and just letting my city build, getting that money so I could add more stuff, adding stadiums, more power plants. And then those disasters would happen. Bowser would come storming through your city and then you'd have to rebuild everything. I loved what they did here. This was really a fun game, especially on the Super Nintendo, where I could just play it at home. I didn't need to go to the computer lab or sit in the library at lunchtime and play SimCity there. I could just play SimCity at home, which is why I was really excited when I picked this one up, when I pulled this one out of that Retro Games treasure box and finally added it to my collection again. SimCity is number 32 in my Super Nintendo collection. Number 33 in my Super Nintendo collection is going to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. Now this is the fourth one in that series of Ninja Turtles games that we got back in the day. And this one is super cool. I love the graphics in this one. I love that they brought the characters from those movies we had back then, the cartoons, and even the comic books. Like Slash. I loved the comic books with Slash in them back in the day. I can remember picking those comic books up at the grocery store, sitting there and reading those as my mom was shopping, and then getting to take one of them home every once in a while. And seeing him in this really took me back to those moments, which was awesome. Now, I didn't get to play this one until I was an adult, but they really took that beat 'em up gameplay that we had in Turtles the Arcade and the Manhattan Project, and they just made it better in this one. I love the sprites, I love the look, and I love that they took some of the mechanics, like when you grab the foot soldier and you throw him at the screen, and they actually made him usable attacks, like when Shredder's trying to blast you with the cannon. Before you end up going back in time, you actually have to take those Foot Clan and throw them at him to do damage. Like overall, this is a really fun and well done game. They really hit this one out of the park, or I guess threw this one off the screen, I don't know. But I'm really excited that I have this one in my collection. This is a great game and I just enjoy playing it.
This is Cowabungie. And this is Cowabungo. But the turtles for your 16-bit system are Cowabunga! Holy cow, it's Turtles in Time! The cool arcade game for Super NES, now with tasty turtle duels. And psych up your Sega Genesis with the Hyper Stone Heist and all new 3D Turtle Thrash. So remember, this is Cowabungo. But the turtles for Super NES and Sega Genesis are...
Cowabunga, dude.
Now another beat 'em up on the Super Nintendo, number 34 in my Super Nintendo collection is going to be Final Fight 2. Now I'd never actually played a Final Fight game before this one. After playing it, I'm really excited to get to pick up the first one and the third one and add those to my set, because this is a really cool and fun beat 'em up here as well. I like that you can see the enemies' names at the top while you're fighting them, and they also have that life meter, even though the names do get just a little bit repetitive. Like, why does every guy that looks like this dude here and likes knives have the name Robert? Now, I did play this probably more than I had to get game footage for it, but I really enjoyed it. I do like that I can kind of get them all to one side of the screen by tossing them, and I can just mow them all down with punches. I kind of wish that there was maybe more attack options, but I guess why fix what isn't broken? Just punch them in the face, right? Now, because I haven't played the first one or the third one, I did do a little bit of research on this, and they did bring back one character from the first one. They brought us 2 new characters in this one, but it kind of sounds like they just play the same as the other 2 they didn't bring from the first one. And this is multiplayer, which is fun, except for you can hit each other, which probably would have been fun if you had a sibling back there and you wanted to put in a video game and just like establish your dominance against them. But I can imagine it would be a little rough nowadays trying to play it when I just keep punching my buddy and we're just trying to beat these guys up. But overall, this is a really fun one that makes me excited to collect those other 2 on the Super Nintendo. Game number 34 in my Super Nintendo collection is Final Fight 2. Now, game number 35 in my Super Nintendo collection is going to be Secret of Mana. Now, this is the first game in the Mana series that actually used the name Mana in the title. Now, we had Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy, which is really the first one in the Mana series, but with this one, at least we knew it was a Mana game. This is a cool game because of what it is. I remember renting this one as a kid and really enjoying just kind of what it was while I played it. Back then, I didn't know it was in a series of games from Japan. I just knew it was a Squaresoft title and it wasn't Final Fantasy. Now this does play more like a Zelda game, but has more of that RPG feel to it, and back then I was loving it. It might not be the best game for this style of game, but it is a lot of fun. And I love that you can play multiplayer in this one when you finally do get those other characters. The story is simple and maybe not as hard-hitting as some of those other Square titles we had back in the day, but once you get that dragon and can explore, it really does open this game up. I think the music in this one is actually really well done. I like that some of the music really adds feeling to those areas you're in that isn't there just from the visuals. What does get me is some of the hitboxes on the enemies, but once you figure that out and kind of learn how that ring menu system works, this can be a lot of fun. If you are playing multiplayer, that ring menu system can be a bit of a headache. Even single player, you can kind of use that a little bit to break some things in the game because it pauses the game in the background while you are in that menu. And it definitely takes some getting used to, but once you get it figured out, it is fairly easy to use. But if you're interested in this one, this is a lot of fun. Absolutely worth picking up, playing it with some friends or family, and just enjoying it for what it is.
Peaceful land, paradise is threatened by an unspeakable evil, and only one person has found the power to restore perfect order. In a new action-adventure game for your Super NES comes an exciting tale, The Secret of Mana, from Square, maker of the world's greatest video games.
Speaking of what it is, game number 36 in my Super Nintendo collection is gonna be Spider-Man. That's all it's titled, is Spider-Man on the box, but it's actually like Spider-Man the Animated Series. Now, it's a Spider-Man game, but right away it kind of looks a little weird to me. I don't know why Spider-Man is so jacked in this game. It's an okay game, but it kind of suffers a little bit from its controls in my opinion. There's just too many buttons being used here. Yes, I understand the Super Nintendo had those shoulder buttons, that L and R, and also had those other 4 buttons you could use, but they just used every single one of them. The R button makes me run, the L button makes me swing on webs. There's a jump button, there's a punch button, there's a kick button, and there's a button that lets me shoot these web bullets. I don't know why I couldn't just like hold the jump button and that would make me run. For the first like 5 minutes, I was just storming around at slow pace because I didn't realize I need to hit a shoulder button to run. And I feel like I'm dying a lot in this game because I don't know what button I should be pressing. I'm just smashing the wrong button because it just doesn't feel intuitive while I'm playing it. Now, I'm sure I could probably go into the options and maybe change the button layout. I don't even know if that's an option on this, but I don't think I should have to. It's just not done very well. The levels can be pretty confusing in this one. I find myself doing a lot of backtracking before I realize I just gotta kick something and then I can continue on. It's definitely not the best Spider-Man game on the system, which kind of sucks because I used to love that Spider-Man the Animated cartoon back in the day. Game number 36 in my Super Nintendo collection, Spider-Man or Spider-Man the Animated Series, whatever you want to call it.
It's lonely at the top. The lizard! He always has a tale to tell. Well, if it isn't Venom, a dentist's worst nightmare. Let me give you a hand. Sorry, Dr. Octopus, wrong floor. I was looking for houseware.
Web Racer Spider-Man and action figures sold separately.
Game number 37 in my Super Nintendo set is one that I've talked about before. This is a little bit of a hidden gem. It's gonna be Lagoon. Now, Lagoon is another one of those top-down adventure games, that Zelda Link to the Past style looking game. But in this one, you've kind of got to do some weird exploring. I feel like I'm going back and forth. I'm trying to find where I need to go. Like, oh, I gotta go talk to the mayor. Oh, I gotta go over here, but this door is locked. Oh, it's this one over here. That's the whole start of the game, which can kind of affect you wanting to play more of it. You're gonna need to commit to playing Lagoon. I played a bunch of it when I first got it, and I was really enjoying it. I'd done some research and heard this was a bit of a hidden gem, so once I got into it, I really liked what I was seeing. You're just going to want to take your time and figure it out and just keep at it. It is just your typical adventure game. The story is not super in depth. It's definitely not as high end as some of the other ones on the system. And if you take a break from it like I did, you're basically going to have to relearn everything all over again in this one. Because it doesn't play quite the same as some of the other ones where you're just kind of used to that's how these type of games play. What I really don't like is how short the attack range is with his sword. I don't like that it doesn't equip automatically. It can be a bit of a pain. But if you're looking for a cheap one that is fun and isn't Zelda: Link to the Past, pick up Lagoon. Because I think as long as you enjoy those top-down adventure style games, and you commit some time to playing this one, you'll probably have a lot of fun with it. And it is totally worth picking up. Game number 38 in my Super Nintendo collection is gonna be Super Ghouls N Ghosts. Ghosts. Now I had this one as a kid, and back then I remember loving the way it looked, the way it played. I died all the time. I probably played the first 2 or 3 areas 1,000 times and I never finished it. Now as an adult, I still love the way it looks, I still love the way it plays, and I think this is the cheapest game of all time. Like, what is this? And what is that? Why would this spawn like that? Come on, game. Now, I know I'm not a real gamer. My reflexes are slow, and I would rather grind levels in a JRPG for days than die repetitively in a shoot 'em up or a platformer. But what really makes me love this game, even after all the cheap deaths, is the memories I have of it as a kid. I used to make my own game levels like the ones in this. I had them all drawn out on pieces of printer paper, taped to the walls of my bedroom, so I had these big long maps that looked a lot like this game. Back then, I wanted video games in my life. I wanted to design them. Now, I remember that I wanted to be part of the gaming industry as a kid, but the memories of drawing those maps, they'd escaped me. This game, putting it in the system to film footage for this video, brought those memories back from the dead. A lot like when I have to press continue after the 95th death on level 2. Now, I did emulate this once, and I think I made it all the way to like the last level until I kind of lost interest. This was back in those early 20 years when I had better things to do than play video games. But I was using save states on that, which I guess isn't probably really super how it's supposed to be done. Now maybe one day I will sit down and play it all the way through, figure out how to actually play it. But for now, I'm just gonna sit back and bask in those memories that it brought back to me today. Because that really is my favorite thing about collecting video games. Game number 38 in my Super Nintendo collections, Super Ghouls N Ghosts. Game number 39 in my Super Nintendo is an actual sequel in a JRPG series, and it's gonna be Breath of Fire 2. Now this one is set 500 years after the events of Breath of Fire 1 on the Super Nintendo. It actually brings back characters, it brings back town names, it brings back clans, and a lot of other things from the first one. Now, one of the major complaints about the Breath of Fire games on the Super Nintendo is all the grinding it takes to level your characters up. But like I just said, that's kind of my bread and butter. I love grinding and I love leveling characters up. I can't beat Super Ghouls N Ghosts, but I will have the highest level characters in a JRPG. Now, Capcom localized this themselves, and it definitely shows that they weren't used to doing that. A lot of complaints about this one is the translation, and trust me, it's annoying for sure. But the story in this one is bigger and better than the first one, even with the translation errors. Like, there's some really cool stories revolving around some of the characters you get in this one. And there's a ton of characters to find. The hunting and the fishing mechanics they brought into this one are super cool, something they brought from the first one and made better for us. And overall, I really enjoy this game. The encounter rate is crazy, but with the characters that aren't active in your party not getting any experience points, I kind of don't mind that. I can just smash headlong into enemies every 5 seconds and level those characters up, which is great until I'm trying to get somewhere and I'm getting pummeled by those encounters. I like the sprites in this, I like the graphics, and for me, this is the same as the first one. I remember seeing this on the shelf at the rental stores back in the day and wanting to play it just based off that cover art. I like the amount of characters we get in these games, and both of these ones, number 1 and number 2, they're just my type of game. I don't know, that's just me. And if you want, you can always try to find these on the Game Boy Advanced. Might make that a little bit cheaper for you. But for me, I'm always gonna want to get the originals. Maybe one day I'll play those ones so I compare the two of them, but for now, I'm so excited to have this one and the first one in my Super Nintendo collection. All right, game number 40 in my Super Nintendo collection is gonna be Tiny Toons Buster Busts Loose. This is another one of those platformer games we got, and this one's actually a lot of fun. This one is a little bit on the cheaper side, and I really do enjoy most of the Tiny Toon games that we actually got. This one has a dash mechanic where you use that L button and that R button to run. Make sure you watch your meter on that or you'll be halfway up a wall and run out, and then you'll just fall you're down. You're gonna be using that a lot. Your attack in this one, you can't just jump on the enemies like you think you would be able to. There's this weird drop kick mechanic, and the animation for that, he does this weird spin you can see, which definitely can affect if you hit the enemy or not sometimes. I kind of wish I could just jump on their heads and continue on, and maybe this was like a super move. This one has some really fun and interesting levels. The mini games in this one can be a lot of fun. I like that the levels are just all over the place. Kind of makes it for a fun experience as you're playing the game. It also has a password system, and you can just look those passwords up on the internet now and play whatever levels you want. You can even just pick to play the mini games. And it actually has a Star Wars style level, which is super cool to see. Not super sure how they got away with that, but the stormtroopers in it are pretty neat. And there is some secrets you can unlock. I will let you figure those out though. Overall, Tiny Toons Adventures Buster Busts Loose. I love the sprites. It takes me right back to that cartoon back in the day. The bosses aren't super difficult to deal with. Overall, really fun game. Definitely worth picking up, especially because it's cheap. Just a fun platformer you can throw in the system.
Konami has two very cool Tiny Toon Adventures games for Sega Genesis and Super NES.
The animation gives you a
Real cartoon feel. On Super NES, play Buster Bust Loose. Spin, kick, and mad dash through 11 toony levels. Sound great? On Sega Genesis, play Buster's Hidden Treasure, an island adventure
to find the fortune before
Montana Max.
Play a tune on Sega Genesis or Super NES.
What are you looking at? Get your own games.
So that's another 10 games in my Super Nintendo collection. There's some interesting ones in here. Definitely let me know if you have memories of any of these games. If you have games you think I should be going out and finding that means something to you, let me know in the comments why, and I will see if I can find those as I hunt for games.